The Denver Broncos continue to make smart moves, and one of the most interesting decisions they made recently was passing on Cooper Kupp. While some might think they missed out, it was actually a calculated decision, and there are several reasons why this is fantastic news for the Broncos. In this video, we'll break down why they made that choice and why it's a win for the team. As a lifelong Denver Broncos fan, I'm absolutely pumped about what's happened during this NFL free agency period. It's been a great time for the team, and if you're a Broncos supporter like me, you're probably feeling the same excitement. By the way, if you're enjoying the offseason moves, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps to boost this content and makes a huge difference for the channel. I'm curious to hear what you think. How would you grade the Broncos' moves this offseason? CBS gave them a B, but honestly, they missed the mark on covering all the details of the free agency. For example, I was talking to a friend today who's a Detroit Lions fan, and he didn't even know the Broncos signed Evan Engram. When he found out, he was shocked. It's a game changer for Denver. Personally, I'd give the Broncos' free agency period an A+ without a doubt. It was phenomenal. Honestly, anyone who says otherwise clearly didn't see the bigger picture. Of course, as fans, we can be greedy, wondering if we could have gotten a punter or maybe even Cooper Kupp, but I truly believe passing on Kupp was the right call. Now let's dive into the decision to pass on Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp is a Washington native, and he's headed back to the Pacific Northwest to join the Seattle Seahawks. Now, when it comes to NFC teams I can't stand, the Seahawks are right at the top of the list. They used to be a rival in the AFC West, and let's not forget they beat us in the Super Bowl. Plus, they definitely didn't help the Broncos when it came to the Russell Wilson trade. So, as a Broncos fan, I wouldn't mind if they had a rough season. The Seahawks made a bold move by signing Kupp to a deal worth at least $15 million per year. That's a lot of money, especially for a player with a history of injuries. It's a risky gamble, and I don't think it was a smart move by Seattle. For context, this contract is worth more than the one the Broncos gave to Courtland Sutton last year. And if the Broncos had spent that much on Kupp, it might have changed their plans with Sutton. Personally, I'd choose Sutton over Kupp every single day of the week. I'm actually glad the Broncos didn't go after Cooper Kupp in the end. Sure, there's been a lot of talk about how the team was in the mix, but I believe Sean Payton knew exactly what Kupp had left to offer. He likely had a set amount in mind and wasn't willing to exceed it. Payton, who's close friends with Sean McVay, had the chance to pick McVay's brain about Kupp's future potential when they spent time together in Cabo this summer. It turns out, Kupp expressed interest in joining the Broncos, but even with that, the team stuck to their budget. They had a number they were comfortable with, and they weren't going to budge. This decision by the Broncos is a smart one. As fans, it can be tempting to jump at big names, but overspending on aging players or those with injury concerns is a fast track to trouble. We've seen this before, especially with the Russell Wilson trade, where we ended up committing a huge deal that didn't pan out as expected. Now, instead of locking themselves into a risky $15 million per year contract for a receiver with a history of taking hard hits, the Broncos avoided a potential setback. It's easy to see why some fans were disappointed, as bringing in Kupp would have been an exciting way to end the free agency period. However, in the long run, it's probably for the best that the Broncos didn't make that move. Kupp is a talented player, no doubt, but he's been banged up for most of his career, and his style of play relies heavily on physicality. His ability to get open often comes from making tough catches over the middle, where he takes huge hits. The reality is those hits add up, and players like Kupp, who aren't built to take that kind of punishment long term, often end up struggling with injuries. We've seen this happen with other smaller, quicker receivers who rely on taking a beating over the middle, like Wes Welker and even Keenan Allen toward the end of his time with the Chargers. No matter how talented you are, those kinds of hits take a toll, and the last thing the Broncos need is to be stuck with a player who might not be able to play a full season because of his injury history. It's great to see that Payton and the Broncos front office didn't get caught up in the hype and stayed focused on the bigger picture. As Zach Stevens pointed out, the team was clear on their value for Cooper Kupp, and they weren't about to overpay for a player whose best days may already be behind him. The Broncos were clear about their financial boundaries, and that's something to be proud of. Imagine going into a car dealership and telling the salesman, "This is what I'm willing to pay, and I'm not going above that, no matter how hard they try to persuade you." It's a smart financial decision, and the Broncos handled it just as wisely when it came to Cooper Kupp. They knew what they were willing to spend, and they weren't going to let emotions or outside pressure change that. Even Troy Rank recently pointed out that the Broncos were never even considering paying more than $15 million for Kupp. For comparison, when Courtland Sutton re-signed with the team, his deal was worth $13.5 million per year. Sutton is a better all-around wide receiver at this point in his career and has maintained his level of play without the injury concerns that Kupp has had. As we approach the end of NFL free agency, there's a lot of good news for the Broncos. One of the biggest wins was landing Dre Greenlaw, who was an absolute steal. It's moves like this that make me so confident in giving the Broncos an A for their free agency. The fact that so many players wanted to come to Denver shows how far the team has come. Deebo Samuel expressed interest in joining the Broncos. Dre Greenlaw chose Denver despite his own team trying to keep him. And even Cooper Kupp mentioned to Adam Schefter that he'd be excited to play in Denver. Then there's Evan Engram, who picked the Broncos over the Chargers, even though both teams had the same offer on the table. Hwanga also had multiple suitors, including the Miami Dolphins, but chose to sign with Denver. It's clear that the Broncos are becoming an appealing destination for talented players. And speaking of Greenlaw, it's even cooler to see that he's been a fan of the Broncos since he was a kid. His new Instagram profile picture shows him wearing the team's orange and blue, which just adds to the excitement for fans. It's a reminder of the days when we saw legends like John Elway leading the team. Seeing these players with such a deep connection to Denver makes it even more exciting as a fan. Another key factor in the Broncos' free agency success is the quality of character in the players they've brought in. Sean Payton didn't just focus on talent, he made sure the new signings were high-character guys. It's reassuring to know that none of these players are likely to get into trouble off the field. Payton did his homework, and it's evident that the Broncos are in a good place, both on and off the field. Meanwhile, other teams like the Buffalo Bills are celebrating their free agency success, but the Broncos are quietly making the moves that will pay off in the long run. Another huge win for the Broncos is the character of the players they've brought in. It's great to see that while other teams might be dealing with performance-enhancing drug violations, two of the Buffalo Bills' free agents are already facing suspensions of at least 6 games for such violations. The Broncos have signed players who aren't relying on shortcuts. These are athletes who bring talent, but they're also committed to doing things the right way. That's a huge positive for the team moving forward. In other exciting news, one word we never have to hear again until the season starts is Joker. Honestly, I think if the Broncos hadn't signed Evan Engram in free agency, all we'd be talking about is who Sean Payton would pick as his Joker in the NFL draft. I think we're all a little tired of the word, but Engram has silenced any doubts. He came out and made it clear that he's the real Joker by posting a tweet that says it all, complete with a reference to how I got these scars. He's ready to take on the role, and we can now stop worrying about it. With Engram on the roster, Payton can now focus on other needs in the draft. The tight end position is locked down, and the team can move forward with confidence. Engram's bold statement has made it clear that he's up for the challenge, and now the Broncos have one less question to answer. Looking ahead, the focus is now on what the Broncos will do with the wide receiver position. With Cooper Kupp signing with Seattle, it seems like the dominoes are finally starting to fall. Many of the top free agent wide receivers have been waiting to see what Kupp's contract would look like, and now that his deal is done, we're likely to see other names come off the board soon. Some of the top remaining free agents include Amari Cooper, Stephon Diggs, and Keenan Allen. These are all names that could fit well with the Broncos, but Sean Payton has already made it clear that he feels confident in the young receivers already on the roster. During a recent interview, Payton spoke about the team's core group of wide receivers, and he's feeling very good about where they stand. Courtland Sutton, the veteran leader of the group, is already established, and then there's Troy Franklin, who showed his potential in a crucial game against the Buffalo Bills. Let's not forget about Marvin Mims either. He's been incredibly explosive. For me, the highlight of the year was Mims' 2-touchdown performance against the Cincinnati Bengals. It was a breakout moment that showed just how dynamic he can be when given the opportunity. Honestly, I'm totally fine with letting those big-name wide receivers pass. Unless we can sign one of them for a vet minimum, I feel great about the wide receiver group we have right now. We might consider taking a chance on a receiver in the draft, but overall, I'm confident in the talent already on the roster. And that's not even mentioning Jalen Virgil, who I think could be a future replacement for Cortland Sutton in a couple of years. He's a phenomenal player, and at one point, he was B. Nix's favorite target. With the addition of Evan Engram, there's less need to rely on wide receivers for as many targets as we did last season, and hopefully we'll find a solid running back too. That would take the pressure off of Wilson so he won't have to throw the ball 50 times a game. It's wild to think about how well we performed last year despite having so many holes. We were essentially tied with the Buffalo Bills at halftime in a playoff game, even though we were missing key players like inside linebackers, had limited safety depth outside of Brandon Jones, and didn't have a tight end to speak of. On top of that, we didn't have a running game. Even without all those crucial pieces, we held our own against a playoff caliber team. It shows just how close we were to being really competitive. We definitely exceeded expectations, and going forward, we're only going to get better. So when I saw Colin Cowherd's predictions for the AFC West, I was pretty shocked. Normally, he's pretty supportive of Sean Payton and B. Nix, but he not only predicted the Broncos wouldn't make the playoffs, he also had us finishing third in the division. That's just crazy to me. We've made huge improvements, and we're going to have a better quarterback this year. Plus, our wide receivers will be better in year 2 than they were in year 1. For the first time ever, Colin Cowherd, you're canceled. Get out of my feed. Lastly, I want to mention one of the highlights of my time since starting YouTube. Over the past year and a half, I've listened to Darren McKee, DMAC, on 104.3 and now on Altitude. He also has his own podcast, Kill You With Truth, and it's been an awesome experience to follow his work and hear his take on everything. Mike Carolini, whose last name I always seem to butcher, is doing an incredible show once a week that you've got to check out. If you haven't already, go subscribe to his channel and watch his videos. It's essentially Denver Broncos PTI, where he brings together different Broncos content creators, podcasters, and radio personalities to compete in Broncos trivia. I'm not going to spoil how it ended, but it's a lot of fun to watch. I've always been a huge fan of DMAC, honestly more than Bill Simmons or anyone else, and I managed to hold my own in the trivia challenge. Go watch it and let me know in the comments how I did. Broncos country, we're back. We've had a great free agency, and there's a lot to be excited about moving forward. The future looks bright, and it's time to believe.